Story 1. You will really appreciate how mundane your life was before. No matter how awful your job was or how annoying your living situation was, unless they were truly terrible, they won't seem so bad anymore. You will never do a harder job than being homeless. Unfortunately, once you are in that situation, you cannot clock out. It becomes easy to slip into addiction due to stress, with constant drug use happening around you. It becomes nearly impossible to pull yourself out on your own, especially when many employers are reluctant to hire someone who is homeless. I felt like I was in a horror movie for 3 years, dealing with addiction and living in shelters or on the streets. My situation did not improve until I went to jail, where I had to sober up, and then I sought mental health treatment after my release and received disability support. Story 2. It is frustrating. The biggest thing I remember is how hard some people try to pretend they do not notice you. They will go out of their way to avoid eye contact and act as if they do not hear you when you ask how they are doing. I assume it is because they feel obligated to give money if they look at you, but it can be a very isolating feeling. Sometimes, when I was performing with my guitar to earn money, people would approach me and say they had no money to give but wanted to let me know they really liked my playing. Honestly, that was as valuable to me as money, if not better. It felt nice to be acknowledged and have people engage with me. Now that I am in a much better place, whenever I see someone panhandling or performing, even if I do not have money on me, I make eye contact with them and ask how their day is going or let them know I enjoy their playing. Sometimes, the best part of my day is simply having a stranger acknowledge my existence. Story 3. The most isolating and soul-crushing experience is when you receive no help. You struggle to eat and take care of yourself, leading to a decline in your mental health. It makes you deeply resent the system. Story 4. It honestly wasn't so bad for me, but reading through this thread, it seems like loneliness and isolation are people's biggest struggles. I am a massive introvert who actively avoids most social situations and is perfectly happy keeping myself entertained. I knew in advance that I was being evicted. I had been unemployed for a few months and was behind on my rent by around $4,000. I had just started a new job, but the landlord's patience had run out. I took my last bit of money and my first paycheck from the new job and got myself a 5-foot by 5-foot storage locker for my most important possessions, as well as a single-person tent, a -10-degree sleeping bag, and a $10 air mattress. I never slept on the sidewalk or a park bench. I was about 20 minutes outside of the local downtown, in a heavily wooded area that was deceptively close to everything. I've always struggled with addiction and depression, but I didn't find that being homeless made it any worse. I was a little nervous about leaving my tent and sleeping bag in place while I went about my daily business, but quickly learned that packing them up every day and carrying them everywhere was both impractical and made me look like a homeless person. So I took the gamble and left them in place daily, and I never faced any issues. I learned all the nearby locations that had single toilet, lockable bathrooms for shaving, brushing my teeth, and using some body wash with a damp cloth. There was a local park about 15 minutes from me with a water fountain, where I kept 3 to 4 bottles of water in my tent. The fact that I was working full-time at the new job probably helped a lot with my mental health and keeping myself occupied. In my downtime, I read books during the daylight hours and watched videos before bed after it got dark. I probably had the healthiest sleeping pattern I've ever had because there was nothing to do at night. Keeping my phone charged was annoying. Did you forget to charge it at home again? Was definitely a question I heard from my coworkers. In the end, I was homeless for 4 months, from September 1st to December 16th. The rainy months were annoying, as I tried to keep from tracking water into my tent. December was a bit cold, but I luckily live in a fairly temperate area. I just grabbed an extra 2 blankets from my storage and wrapped them around my -10 sleeping bag to create a cocoon for myself. I was never cold once I got into my bed. I did wear a hoodie to keep my ears warm. By the way, don't actually trust the -10 rating on a sleeping bag. By the time my 4 months were up, I had paid back the old landlord the $4,000 I owed and saved $5,000. I've never saved that amount in my life before or since. That $5,000 disappeared immediately when I found a new place, paid the deposit, first month's rent, and bought groceries. For the first month, I slept on the same $10 air mattress in the middle of the floor in my -10 sleeping bag, but it felt good. Looking back, It's a little strange that I prioritized paying back the old landlord before finding a new home for myself, but it also felt good to take care of that obligation. Story 5. Scary, isolating, filthy. I was fortunate to have a hidden place to sleep. I joined a gym so I could shower every morning. I deceived my family about what was happening in my life. That was decades ago. I sometimes still wake up at night. I hear a sound and wonder, for a moment, if my camp is compromised. Then I see my husband sleeping next to me and know it's just a memory. Story 6. I was homeless for a while. Doing it alone was challenging. I wasn't skilled at it because I was 37 or 38 and didn't know much about surviving. I had no car and nothing to rely on. I met someone with experience who told me to come along with him. I did, and he took care of me. He showed me how to earn money through panhandling. We made enough to travel through 4 states to where I'm living now. There, we got our documentation in order, found jobs, and now live stable lives. It wasn't easy, but it helped me get off drugs, and I've learned a lot about people, both the good and the bad. I learned a lot more about myself. Overall, it turned out to be a positive experience in the end. I sometimes fantasize about going back. It was quite exhilarating, honestly. Story 7. I was homeless during my active addiction. It's obviously different to be homeless when you're not using drugs. For me, there was something liberating about going anywhere and doing anything I wanted. People either treated me poorly or were kind and understanding. Surprisingly, I encountered normal people who gave me money and said, "Hey, I've been there before." Another aspect that felt nice was that when you have nothing to lose. Now that I've been clean from heroin for 7 years, I have a career, my own place, a car, and a Roth IRA, things I never thought I could achieve. However, with everything I have now, there's an underlying fear. Anything could happen. A car accident, a relapse, a fire, or becoming disabled, and I could lose everything. The things I wanted so badly, that took me 10 years to achieve, could all be gone due to circumstances beyond my control. I'm not saying this situation is not better, but it is different. The best way I can describe it is like the opening scene from a movie where a character's place burns down, and he names all the things he lost in the fire. The possessions he worked so hard to obtain ultimately defined him. Story 8. It is truly awful. I still have nightmares about it almost 15 years later. I have a constant background fear that arises when nothing else is happening, that everything could go wrong and I could find myself back there again. It is shocking how little help actually exists if you do not meet strict criteria. It is easier than people think to slip through the cracks, especially if you do not know how to navigate the system to obtain assistance. Story 9. I was actually lucky. I still had my truck and I had a gym membership. I used a post office box and went to an employment agency to get started back in the workforce. I slept in my truck, showered at the gym, brushed my teeth, and went to work. I volunteered for as many hours as I could get. 18 months later, I found a much better job and moved in with a coworker who needed a renter. After that, things got back to normal. How did I become homeless? My wife became terminally ill. This was in 2008 during the Great Recession, leading to 2 lost incomes. She couldn't work because she was terminally ill, construction was at a standstill, and she was more important to me than my future after she passed away. When she died, I had $22,000 in debt, and the house was in foreclosure. I had insurance too, terrific insurance, actually. It was an 80-20 plan, but I still had to pay 20% of everything we accrued in 2 years. It was the perfect storm that led to my homelessness. Story 10. You might get a house someday, but you will never mentally recover. That experience changes your perspective forever. Story 11. Currently homeless. It's lonely, expensive, and hard to escape. When you return to your camp and encounter troubled individuals around it, as I did last night, it is quite frustrating. Story 12. I wasn't homeless for very long, but it was an interesting experience. The only part one miss is that every day felt like an odyssey, with so much happening, whereas in a more regular life, it's much calmer and more mundane. Another part that really stands out in my memory is how some people treat you, seeing you as subhuman or like a misbehaved dog. Now, my life is pretty good, and while I don't always give panhandlers money, I do always try to talk to them and treat them like normal people. Story 13. I wasn't homeless for very long, but when I was, it felt like a second job. I had to find new places to park at night, arrive late, and leave early in the morning to avoid suspicion. I spent my days at the library for air conditioning, electricity, and entertainment. I showered at a local gym. I survived on protein bars and nutritional shakes. Fortunately, some friends who learned I was living in my car took me in and let me stay until I found my own place. Story 14. It is exhausting. I was always looking for food, shelter, pet supplies, a bathroom, toilet paper, and a shower. I would do anything for a shower, a cigarette, and some tuna. Maybe I could raid the fridge and grab a change of clothes after whoever went to sleep. I often felt disconnected from my body and turned my mind off. I became a walking amygdala. I wouldn't have survived if I hadn't lost my mind a little. Story 15. You learn to live without everything. No shelter, food is scarce, and health care is minimal. Your clothes become filthy and tattered in a surprisingly short time. If you're very lucky, you might have a blanket or sleeping bag. Relieving yourself on the streets is beyond humbling. If you're fortunate, you have someone to keep watch so no one approaches you when you're vulnerable. You can be arrested for a basic human need. You learn to panhandle or go without. If you're a woman like me, you learn to protect yourself. You carry a weapon and learn how to use it. You stay hidden, out of sight, out of mind, hopefully. You learn to find a man for protection. You discover reserves of strength you never imagined. You learn to be strong and resilient. You master the art of making your own camp stove and are amazed by your resourcefulness. You learn how to pitch a tent and appreciate the beauty of being dry. You realize the most important thing: possessions are just extra weight to carry. They are worse than worthless. They weigh you down. People are what matter, relationships and love. There is a community of individuals who will teach you how to survive. Then it becomes your turn to help the newcomers. I hope you never have to learn most of these lessons. If you're one of the newcomers, reach out to me. I'll tell you how to stay alive. 15 years on the streets, 8 months inside. Story 16. I was homeless for a while as a child, but we were just couch surfing and always had a roof over our heads. I was young enough to think it was cool, but I'm sure my mom felt a lot more stress about it than I did. Story 17. I spent one night on the street. I knew where the shelter was, so I went there first thing the next morning. After 5 nights as a client, I was offered the opportunity to join the resident crew. I spent the next 2 years living there and working in the office. That's how long it took for me to feel comfortable being sober. A local charity program helped me find an apartment and paid my rent and utilities until I was able to get a job. For me, it was much easier than for many. My family was supportive and occasionally helped me with some pocket money. Story 18. The worst part was feeling unwelcome everywhere. Any place I went, I was shooed off with disgust. Most of the time, I slept in my car, but every night I was woken up multiple times by people telling me to move elsewhere. Eventually, I found less hostile places to park, and I would rotate between them. I would not recommend this experience. Story 19. I was homeless for about 8 months when I was 20. I lived in my truck. I worked full-time as a home health aide for a woman who was quadriplegic. I worked 7 days a week and did everything for her. I was paid $300 a month. She was abusive and manipulative. It was hard to get a job without an address. This was in the early 90s, before cell phones. She wouldn't let me use her shower, so I used the gas station bathroom for sink baths. I could go to a convenience store near closing time, and they would let me buy whatever was left in the deli case for just a couple of dollars since they were going to throw it out anyway. Free packets of salsa, mustard, and ketchup helped even the driest corn dog go down. I had firm rules for myself. I wouldn't break the law, beg, do drugs or alcohol, or get caught up in someone else's problems. I had been in a mental hospital the year before, and it was so awful that I never wanted to do anything that would put me back there. When I wasn't working, I focused on managing my mental illness. I went to the library and read books on meditation and relaxation techniques, and I practiced a lot. It helped slow down my racing thoughts and relax my muscles enough that I felt ready to ask for help. I was lucky, really lucky, when I finally gathered up the courage to walk into a mental health clinic. The receptionist told me that the wait was months long. I went numb, but tears started to fall. I don't remember what I said as I turned to leave, but a lady walking by looked at me and said, "I remember you." She told the receptionists, "She's already in our system. Get her scheduled with me." She had conducted my psychological evaluation in the emergency room the year before. She was an incredible therapist, and the psychiatrist at that clinic was amazing too. Together, they helped me obtain supplemental security income, food assistance, and medical care. I was lucky. Story 20. I was often homeless as a child, and it almost felt normal, but I knew that it shouldn't. It was embarrassing, and I was quite antisocial because I never wanted people to find out. It was just how we lived. The times when we weren't homeless felt like a little treat. It wasn't until I was older that I realized how truly messed up that was. Story 21. I was homeless since I was 18, living in and out of shelters because I didn't want to be around drugs. When I turned 20, I was sleeping on the streets with my now fiancé, and it became clear how privileged others believed themselves to be compared to us. Friends who I thought would support me never answered, giving excuses after saying, "Call me if you need anything." We were starving for most of that time. Finally, we secured a place in January, and we are grateful to have a room over our heads, especially since others would not have given it a second thought. Story 22. The worst part for me was having no place that felt like home at first, a base to which I could return. I soon realized that I needed to find a singular place I could go back to every day, and it made me feel better. Story 23. I still talk myself through everything. Can come off poorly when people don't know me well. Sending positive energy and love. Story 24. I have been out for almost 3 years and work every hour I can get, but I still cannot afford even a rundown motel because being homeless is very expensive. Every meal has to be bought or found. I will not resort to stealing. Water for hydration is never free, and staying clean is nearly impossible because most places will not let you in unless you spend money there. I believe it should be required for everyone to spend 2 weeks on the streets just to understand how it feels. Story 25. I want to express sadness, but it's deeper, more like a realization that no one cared about me. I felt truly alone. I questioned everything, especially the past, and thought about whether doing things differently could have changed my life. These thoughts consumed me. Eventually, news spread, and it felt like people were trying to take advantage of me, so my whole being reacted with a desire for distance. It was a difficult discovery to make at 16. Story 26. Being homeless was the best time of my life. The only bills I had were for my car and phone. I was a traveling stagehand for several major music festivals in the United States. I spent all summer working outdoors, enjoying 3 catered meals a day while saving money for the winter. Personally, I love sleeping in a tent and doing hard labor all day, but I can understand that it might be someone else's worst nightmare. The worst part for me was heading south for the winter because I disliked the southern United States. However, being homeless in the snow is difficult, and you have to go where the work is. Story 27. The situation is incredibly challenging. Many individuals turn to substances to cope, which can lead to further substance use if they are not already involved. Your health will decline. In New York City, statistics suggest your life expectancy may decrease by 4 years. It seems the United Kingdom does not maintain records like this. You realize how inadequate the National Health Service is. Various staff from different organizations involved in assisting you off the streets are often prejudiced. They expect their efforts to be seen as satisfactory, but in reality, desperation leads you to agree to any arrangement that simply makes them look good. If they were effective, there would not be a homelessness issue. However, these staff members may even accuse you of making it a lifestyle choice. These individuals are unprofessional and should be dismissed collectively. They exploit some of the most vulnerable individuals while engaging in organizational practices and mediocrity. It should be a criminal offense to exploit people's lives for a paycheck. Story 28. I was homeless a long time ago in New York City in 1970. I was a teenager running on adrenaline, one of those gay runaways. There were times I slept on the trains, panhandled, and crashed around. I will tell you who helped me, protected me, and connected me for jobs in the village at after-hours clubs and gay bars. It was the drag queens. They were like my aunties. I ate once a day, usually bologna sandwiches and a pint of milk. I would be invited to their apartments that they shared with other queens, all working in the sex industry. I would crash around. Some of the single-room occupancy hotels were available, and I could get some rest if one of the girls was out for the night. I could get some safe sleep. Back then, the gay scene was much more communal, and we tended to take care of our own. I ended up hitching to Boston to stay with my sister for a while, get some work, and eventually afford an apartment share in Brooklyn. I just had to be in the city. It should have been scary, but I was streetwise to an extent, and I really think I had a guardian angel. New York City never sleeps. The subway runs all night, even though some trains were 3 hours between terminals. I was undernourished, and I hated feeling dirty, with nowhere to wash my hair and the soles falling off my cheap boots. I carried my things in a plastic bag and used lockers at Penn Station in Times Square to store my stuff. I would panhandle, wash dishes, and bus tables at the gay bars. I do not think that is possible now. Fresh off the 1960s, there were a lot of youths in the same place as me. The drinking age was 18, so I could hustle drinks from the straight men who loved to go to gay bars and bother women like me. I did some things I am not proud of at all, but I never hurt anyone or robbed anyone. I mean, if some guy gives you $20 and you tell him you would meet him out front to go home with him but first needed to go to the restroom, someone who worked at the bar would lead me to the fire exit and I would vanish. I did not see that as robbery, just a hustle. They were soliciting me, so my attitude was indifferent. Story 29. As a man, no one cares. There are only cold weather shelters open for us where I was. Only women and children are given shelter unless the temperature is below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. It is frustrating, and I almost died. Story 30. All I had was my car. The thing that stays with me is the smell in my car. It was soul-crushing and made me realize the mistakes I made that led me to that point. I was very fortunate compared to most people in that situation. Story 31. According to my boyfriend, it is rough. It is not an ordinary life. It is challenging to maintain good hydration. If you do not stay with a friend or family member, you have to sleep on a porch. A common question is whether people choose to be homeless. In my boyfriend's opinion, there are two sides to that story. I hope to continue this post later. Story 32. Obviously, your life has come to rock bottom, and you are treated as such by many. I was fortunate enough to stay away from destructive influences. I was a drug addict for 2 years and had been clean for 5 years prior to becoming homeless. I experienced suicidal thoughts, worrying about being homeless, having nothing, and facing an uncertain future. I had to leave an abusive relationship and dreaded where I was heading because of it. I was lucky enough to meet a woman who cared for me and provided support. She ended a 15-year relationship to be with me. I was very fortunate in my experience. Story 33. Halfway, with a car and all belongings in the trunk, I was in a warm climate near the beach. Honestly, it wasn't that bad, although I got on my feet before it got stale. Without the car, it would have been much worse. Story 34. Boring. The relentless passage of time without markers is overwhelming. It feels like an endless struggle to exist without being noticed. Story 35. Being homeless in a car was lonely. However, I imagine that being homeless without a car would be much scarier. Story 36. I was homeless for a few months when I was around 10 years old. My parents divorced and my dad took all of my mom's money and left. As a result, my mom, siblings, and I spent a few months living on the street. I didn't fully understand the situation at the time. I just remember playing on my Game Boy all day. It wasn't until I became an adult that my siblings and I realized, we were homeless, weren't we? Honestly, my mom did a great job of not making it feel like we were living on the streets. We moved between a few abandoned buildings every few days. Remarkably, we didn't even miss school. Even while living on the streets, my mom ensured we attended school every day. Story 37. You learn to appreciate the small things. After going days without a safe place to sleep or not knowing where your next meal is coming from, you appreciate a comfortable couch, bed, and food even more. It also made me more understanding and empathetic to all people because you have no idea what anyone is or has gone through. Personally, it has given me a sense of pride and confidence because I now know that I can survive or do anything. Sleep outside, fast, adapt, and give when I have little. I know many people might not feel the same way since everyone's experience is different, but experiencing homelessness multiple times in my life has made me a more loving person. Life can be hard sometimes, and I never want to make it harder for anyone else ever again. Story 38. There are different levels of homelessness. Some are due to uncontrollable circumstances, while others are willful. Personally, I have taken charge of my situation and recognized my true needs. Living in pure survival has made me realize that we are on a mission, even when life is comfortable. However, many people mistake comfort for success when they should be striving for growth. You also come to understand that no one is really there for you. Often, you know what you need, but no one will provide it, like a carrot on a stick. Story 39. How exhausting it is. You always have to stay on guard, and you must put a lot of planning into doing formerly easy things like showering and storing food. Story 40. Heartbreaking despair, sadness, depression, and hunger accompanied my immediate desire to escape. It was a devastating time in my life, sleeping on the streets or in overnight shelters during white flag nights. Story 41. It was overwhelming. I was 18, living with my parents when my dad decided to stop working, and my mother refused to. I worked at a craft store making $8.25 an hour and struggled to keep us sheltered. We were evicted because my parents were living beyond their means, we lost everything we owned, and they still couldn't get it together. My take-home was $350 a week, and every bit of that was used to keep us in a sleazy hotel, and sometimes that wasn't enough, so we were sleeping on the streets. We went a few days at a time without food and were unable to have clean clothes on a regular basis. All the while, my parents were complaining and lamenting the situation but not doing much to help. Thankfully, it was only for a few months compared to the years that some people face. And thankfully, I didn't lose my job, so I was able to have a bed to sleep in more often than not. But I was pretty sure I was having a mental breakdown. I had to take it one day at a time and was dissociating intensely. I remember being so happy when I had an extra $20 to go to the dollar store and get some kind of groceries. I try not to think about it much, but to this day, almost a decade later, I still have a hard time staying in certain kinds of hotels for vacations or driving past specific spots around town where I had to find a place to sleep. Story 42. I have never been homeless myself, but reading what some of you went through is honestly heartbreaking. It is incredible how much strength it must take just to get through each day. No one should have to live like that. Huge respect to anyone who made it through. You are tougher than most people will ever understand. Story 43. It was bad, but not as bad as I expected. I think I had it better than others. Sometimes I romanticize it. Story 44. To be honest with you, there are some parts that are difficult, of course, like sleeping in the woods or trying to keep a hotel roof over your head. For me, I have medical issues, so I was more prone to being sick more often. The struggle to get back on your feet without an address or phone service, relying on the help of strangers, and being vulnerable enough to ask for help is very disheartening. Yet, on another level, there are things I miss about that time. Yes, there are things I actually miss about being homeless. Life seemed more carefree at times. There was a struggle to keep a hotel room or risk sleeping in a tent in the woods, but I loved nature and enjoyed my time in it, trying to make the best of the situation. There was a lot less stress in life because, even though you have to come up with money for shelter and food, those become your only worries. You aren't stressing over bills. You aren't stressed about money in the same way you are when you have a home with many expenses. Homeless life was simple. No fancy electronics or games, and if you were lucky enough to get a hotel, you had a TV, but those things didn't matter as much anymore. You appreciate small things like a shower or some food much more. There was a lot more family bonding time, playing games and making up your own games. Even taking a walk together to get help allows for more conversation and listening. You're not distracted by your phone, games, or whatever else. You appreciate the beauty of nature around you as you walk. You find hope in humanity through random acts of kindness from strangers. You feel closer to God and talk to Him more, almost walking in prayer. Each day is a struggle to live, and you know that only by the grace of God will you get through another day. He shows Himself to you more, and you witness small miracles that could only come from that grace. You start viewing people differently, and it's a truly humbling experience. You no longer judge people based on appearance. You see them for who they really are. A person's true self emerges when interacting with someone experiencing homelessness. While there may be some unkind individuals, there are 10 more wonderful souls for every unkind person. You no longer care about frivolous concerns, such as being well-dressed to go out or needing makeup. You might face challenges in judgmental environments, but if you show them that you ended up in a bad situation and are not a bad person, their help will increase with time. It may take time, and that can be frustrating, but it's worth it. Eventually, you can get where you need to be. For me, it was the closeness with my family, the feeling of God's constant presence, and realizing humanity isn't as bad as I thought. I learned to enjoy the small things in life and appreciate gestures, such as someone buying you a loaf of bread. You appreciate it more than you've ever appreciated anything in your life. Any random act of kindness feels monumental, leading to a greater sense of humility and enjoyment of nature and adventures. Every day felt like a new adventure. I feel blessed to have had that time experiencing homelessness. It was part of my spiritual journey. I believe some of the people I met were angels sent by God to help me along the way. The close relationship I developed with God allowed me to feel His protection every day. Since then, my perspective on life has changed, and I appreciate my family and life much more than before. I realize all the things we take for granted when life is normal and the extra stresses we place on ourselves for no real reason. While I am beyond happy to no longer be in that position and return to normal life, I have a profound appreciation for the time I spent homeless and the lessons it taught me. I should also mention that my experience occurred in Florida, which I believe makes a huge difference compared to someone who is homeless up north, especially dealing with winters. I don't know how my experience would have been elsewhere in the country, but for me, it was a truly beautiful spiritual journey that I feel blessed to have experienced. I wouldn't change that year I spent homeless. It changed me as a person, and it was a wonderful change. These are my experiences, and I know others may have had vastly different experiences, but this is mine. Story 45. I promised I would not talk about it anymore on Reddit, but I will cheat a little and copy my last comment. Try to get help for my mental health, but I can't. Professionals just ignore my struggles. Then I got divorced, quit my job, and spiraled into my mental illness. I stopped leaving my home for 2 years, stopped paying my bills, and even stopped cashing my checks, becoming more and more buried in my mental state. Then my visa expired, I stopped working, and eventually ended up on the streets. It just got worse. I've been on the street for several years, 8 years. I do not drink, have never used drugs, not even once. I have never stolen anything, not even a pen, and I only started begging last year for coffee and $50 to buy a bottle of gas to cook and the smartphone I am using right now. I stopped showering, changing my clothes, and cleaning my place a few months ago. 6 or 7 months. Right now I'm in such bad shape, so paralyzed, that I have to force myself to move just to drink water. Even if the glass is right there, near my hand, I have to come close to starvation to compel myself to move. It is so strange. Now I'm really ill. Diabetes being the worst, but I have a lot of other illnesses. I am living literally in a room, in an abandoned stable, that I cleaned of rotten food yesterday, full of spoiled food and garbage, completely alone and out of my mind. The place smells terrible, and on hot days I come close to throwing up. People now offer me food on the street, so I'm officially considered a bum. I started to talk about it here on Reddit as a therapeutic mechanism to vent something cathartic. But it is not helping too much, so this is the last time I talk about it. Story 46. Living outside can feel like being at home. Many people now prefer this lifestyle over what they perceive as the constraints of social contracts and civilized frameworks. Some may have a valid point. The system has been dysfunctional for a long time, and the issues are significant. Those who truly do not wish to endure homelessness will often find solutions quickly. I question the credibility of anyone trying to portray a specific narrative of utter helplessness. Even those who experience homelessness involuntarily for a time often learn this through conversations with individuals living on the streets. Many actually choose to be there. Story 47. I cannot speak on this topic extensively, but I experienced homelessness for 72 hours during a road trip. I spent 3 days sleeping in my car to save money. I had just turned 18 and wanted to explore the country on a budget. Those 3 days highlighted the challenges that some people face, often due to circumstances beyond their control. Everything took significantly longer and cost more. To shower, I needed to pay for a day pass at a gym and then went to a laundromat to wash my clothes for $10. I was fortunate to secure a motel on the last day before heading to the snowy mountains to hike Australia's tallest peak. Story 48. Awful. My mother kicked me out at 19. I didn't do drugs or anything. She got mad that I wasn't really helping much around the house while being a full-time student. I lived in my car for a couple of weeks in the gym parking lot, then found someone who would let me stay on their couch. I thought I would repay the favor by cleaning his apartment as best as I could. There was mold all over the dishes, bugs on the counter, a sticky layer of dust on the floors, and the toilet hadn't been cleaned in a long time, but I was grateful for the roof over my head. To be honest, I cried myself to sleep every night, wondering how my life got to that point when I had such big dreams as a child. Story 49. I am currently homeless. Since I have recovered from methamphetamine use and lost my dog, it feels empty. I am trying to figure out where I want to go and how to fill my heart. Materially, it is difficult as people are feeling the pressure due to economic uncertainty. Story 50. Honestly, I feel like I belong and thrive more in that life than I do in my current one. I am happy, but it was a much simpler time for me. Story 51. I thought they made more money than I did by asking and begging for money on the streets because they don't pay taxes. Story 52. It's like normal life, but a little harder, much harder if you're addicted to something. Without alcohol or drugs, it's freedom at its core. I had fewer worries when I was homeless 3 times. I haven't felt that free since then. Story 53. I loved it. I felt clean and healthy. Since people didn't think I was on drugs, they were very nice to me. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.